When we moved into the neighborhood, I genuinely believed we'd found the perfect place to settle down. My wife, Angela, and I had spent years saving up for our first real family home, a cozy single-story with a wide porch, 2 lemon trees in the front yard, and enough space for our kids to run wild in the back. It wasn't a mansion, but it was ours. The neighborhood looked quiet, well-kept, and peaceful. You know, the kind of suburb where people wave as they mow their lawns, where kids ride bikes until dinner, and where block parties actually happen. We wanted that. After everything we'd gone through the last few years, job shifts, the pandemic stress, a scary surgery for our youngest son, this move felt like a fresh start. Angela even cried happy tears the day we signed the closing papers. We'd barely started unpacking the boxes when we first met Karen. At the time, we didn't know her name was Karen. All we knew was that a thin, sharp-looking woman with frosted blonde hair and a clipboard showed up at our front door just hours after we'd arrived. She didn't knock. She rang the bell 3 times fast, like she was trying to wake the dead. When I opened the door, she didn't introduce herself. No hi. Welcome to the neighborhood. No friendly chat. Just a cold look down her nose and the words, "Are you the homeowners?" "Yes," I replied, a bit taken aback. "We just moved in today." She squinted past me into the house, then glanced at the moving truck still parked by the curb. "Just so you're aware," she said, pursing her lips, "this is an HOA-regulated community. There are rules about noise, lawn care, trash bins, parking, decorations, really, all kinds of things. I'd advise you to read the handbook thoroughly." She handed me a thick packet of papers, at least 60 pages, and walked off without another word. Angela walked up behind me, drying her hands with a dish towel. "Who was that?" "No idea," I muttered, still staring at the rules booklet. But I think we just met the neighborhood welcome committee. We didn't hear much from her again, at least, not for a week. Things seemed fine at first. The neighbors across the street, Mike and Shelley, were kind and offered us homemade cookies. The teenage girl next door even offered to walk our dog for free. For the first time in a long while, it felt like things were looking up. But Karen didn't disappear. In fact, she started appearing more often, lingering near our yard with her tiny dog, watching from the sidewalk, pretending to pick up non-existent trash. At first, we laughed it off. Angela called her neighborhood Nancy Drew, always investigating something. Then the letters started. The first one was stuffed in our mailbox. No envelope. Just a folded note printed in all caps. "Trash bins must be moved back by 7 p.m., not 7:30. This is a first warning." I checked my security camera footage. She had left it herself, sneaking up our driveway like a ninja in yoga pants. A few days later, we got another one. This time, it was about the curtains we'd hung in the living room, she said. The color clashed with the neighborhood aesthetic. We didn't respond, thinking maybe she'd get bored and move on. Then one morning, while I was watering the plants out front, I heard her talking to a woman walking her dog across the street. "I just don't understand why those kinds of people move in here," Karen said, loud enough that I couldn't pretend I hadn't heard it. "It brings down the neighborhood value." I froze. "Those kinds?" "Angela and I are a mixed-race couple. Our kids are biracial. We've dealt with ignorant comments before, sure, but never so close to home. It never directed at us while standing in our own yard. That wasn't ignorance. That was hostility." I walked inside and told Angela what I'd heard. Her face fell. "We can't let this woman make us feel like we don't belong," she said, her voice tight. "We do belong here, just as much as anyone else." I nodded, but a pit formed in my stomach. It was clear Karen wasn't just about following rules. She had an agenda, and it had everything to do with who she thought we were. Over the next few days, it only escalated. One morning, I woke up to find a citation taped to our door. proper use of garden fixtures. Apparently, our solar-powered light standard. Ones from Home Depot were distracting. Another time, she complained that our kids were too loud when they played with water. Balloons in our backyard. It didn't matter what we did. If we kept to ourselves, we were unneighborly. If we let our kids laugh outside, we were disruptive. If we hosted Angela's parents for the weekend, she reported us for excessive street parking. It was like she was obsessed with finding a reason to get us out. Every little thing we did became ammunition. We finally realized Karen wasn't going to stop on her own when we got a formal notice from the HOA board. One, she clearly ran inviting us to a compliance review. Angela stared at the letter and shook her head. She wants to build a case against us. She's trying to scare us into leaving, I said. But that's not happening. And just like that, we knew we were going to fight back. Not just for our own peace, but because we weren't about to let some power-hungry suburban tyrant bully us out of the home. We worked so hard for it, the war with Karen had officially begun. By the time we got the formal compliance review letter, it was clear Karen wasn't just one nosy neighbor with too much free time. She was the president of the HOA, and she was on a mission. Angela and I sat down one evening after putting the kids to bed, spreading out all the notes, warnings, and letters she had either hand-delivered or orchestrated through the HOA board. There were over a dozen by that point, and they ranged from complaints about our lawn to supposed violations like improper garage storage visibility, which basically meant the garage door had been open for 10 minutes while I was unloading groceries. "This is insane," Angela said, flipping through the papers. "Who has this much time to watch someone else's house?" "She does," I muttered. "And she's not just watching, she's trying to make us miserable enough to leave." And it worked for about 2 seconds. We were stressed, sure. But we weren't going anywhere. That house was our dream. We bought it for our kids, for our future. And no HOA Karen with a clipboard was going to take that away. So we went to the compliance review meeting. It was held at the community center. And Karen sat at the head of a long fold-out table like she was leading a courtroom trial. She wore a perfectly ironed blouse, a fake pearl necklace, and an expression that screamed, "I'm better than you." Next to her sat 3 other board members, none of whom we'd ever even seen before. The moment we walked in, I could tell it was all for show. She had printed out copies of our so-called violations, complete with photos she'd taken of our yard, our house, and even our kids' chalk drawings on the sidewalk. "I'm sure you understand, Mr. and Mrs. Walker," she began in her clipped voice, "that the HOA is responsible for maintaining the visual integrity and property value of this community. And unfortunately, your continued disregard for the rules has been ... disruptive." Angela leaned forward. "We haven't disregarded anything. Most of these are completely exaggerated or just made up." Karen didn't even blink. "You allowed your children to leave water toys on the lawn overnight. That's a safety hazard and a code violation." "They were 2 foam pool noodles," I said. "In our fenced backyard and the lawn flamingos?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Angela looked incredulous. "You mean the decorations my 7-year-old placed for her birthday?" "We had multiple complaints," Karen said coolly. "Your family's choices affect everyone's experience in this neighborhood. Several residents have voiced concern that you don't align with the standards we uphold." There it was. That thinly veiled phrasing. That dog whistle term, "don't align with the standards." Angela clenched her fists in her lap, but her voice stayed calm. "Are you trying to say we don't belong here?" "I'm saying," Karen replied, her tone syrupy sweet and poisonous, "all at once, that certain behaviors lower the overall appeal of the neighborhood and, by extension, its property value. We are simply acting in the best interest of our homeowners." Angela's voice didn't waver. "We are homeowners. So where is our interest represented?" Silence. That's when I stood up and said, "We're not going to keep defending ourselves every week over ridiculous things. We're not breaking any real rules, you're just twisting them to make us look bad. So unless there's something legitimate, we're done here." Karen looked rattled. Not visibly, but I could tell by the way her hands clutched her binder. A little tighter. She wasn't used to people pushing back. We walked out. But the campaign didn't stop there. The very next day, someone threw eggs at our garage door. I know it was a neighbor because security footage showed a person in a hoodie running from 2 houses down. We called the police and filed a report. Nothing came of it. Then Angela's car tires were slashed. We had to miss work and pay for replacements out of pocket. Again, the security footage was inconclusive. Wherever it was, stayed out of camera range. Karen, of course, denied knowing anything about it. That weekend, a petition was circulated through the neighborhood. A formal request to have us monitored by the HOA for further violations. The language was vague, full of passive-aggressive phrases like concerns about neighborhood culture and preserving traditional values. It made our blood run cold. Angela was livid. She's trying to get the entire neighborhood to turn against us. And at first, it felt like it was working. Neighbors who once waved stopped making eye contact. People who had previously said, "Hello," now crossed the street when we approached. A few even took down decorations that resembled ours, like they didn't want to be associated. The shift was subtle but suffocating. Then something unexpected happened. One of the older residents, a retired teacher named Mr. Delgado, stopped by our house with a gift basket. "I heard what they're saying about you," he said quietly. "I want you to know not everyone agrees with her. Most of us just don't know what to do when she starts something." Angela hugged him right then and there. It opened a small floodgate. Within a few days, we got messages from several other families' quiet support. Texts that read things like, "She tried this with us too," or "We're sorry we didn't. Speak up sooner." It was clear that Karen's reign wasn't just about us. She had been doing this for years, weaponizing HOA rules, targeting people she didn't like, and using property value as an excuse for bullying. That's when we decided we weren't just going to fight back, we were going to expose her. We started collecting our own records. Every letter, every violation, every suspicious incident. We created a private neighborhood Facebook group without Karen in it, where others could share their experiences. What started with 3 members grew to over 20 in 2 weeks. Everyone had a Karen story. One family had been fined for planting vegetables in pots, too visually chaotic. Another had been told their mixed-race foster kids were too loud for the community vibe. It wasn't just us. It never had been. Karen had built her little empire on silence and intimidation. But now, she wasn't the only one with a clipboard, and we weren't staying quiet anymore. The day we posted our story publicly in the new neighborhood Facebook group, everything changed. Angela wrote the post late at night, carefully laying out the timeline, starting from Karen's cold welcome to the bogus compliance review meeting and the escalating acts of harassment. She didn't dramatize it. She didn't point fingers. She just stated the facts. Then she added this line at the end: "We bought our home just like anyone else here. We mow our lawn, take care of our kids, and follow the same rules. If anyone else has had experiences like this, whether you're comfortable sharing them or not, just know you're not alone anymore." We didn't expect much. Maybe a few neighbors would see it. Maybe 1 or 2 would comment, but by the morning, the post had over 100 likes and dozens of replies. People we'd never even met started chiming in. Karen fined us for leaving a stroller on the porch for 2 hours. She reported my son for having a lemonade stand, said it was an unauthorized vendor. She told me I should repaint my door because the color attracted the wrong kind of people. She said my daughter's wheelchair ramp was unattractive. That's when I stopped listening to her altogether. It was like pulling the thread on a sweater, and suddenly the whole thing unraveled. Turns out, Kara had made a habit of quietly targeting families over the years. Anyone who didn't fit her narrow view of what the neighborhood should look like became a target. Young families, mixed couples, renters, veterans with flagpoles. People with unique taste in landscaping. If you were different, you were. On her radar, the difference now. People were talking. Out loud, in public. And she couldn't control it. One neighbor, Marcy, who lived a few houses down, messaged us privately. She said she used to be friends with Karen years ago when she first joined the HOA board. She started off normal, Marcy wrote. Then it went to her head. Now she thinks she owns this place. The board is scared of her. They let her do whatever she wants. Angela read the message aloud and shook her head. She's been getting away with this for years because nobody's had the energy to fight back. Well, I said, we have energy now. That week, we gathered everything we'd collected, documents, videos, witness statements, and filed a formal complaint to the HOA Oversight Committee at the state level. Karen wasn't just enforcing rules anymore. She was abusing her power. And in some cases, violating anti-discrimination statutes. But the real impact came when the neighborhood itself stood up. Marcy hosted an impromptu block meeting in her driveway. She put out folding chairs, coolers, and a few plates of cookies, and nearly 30 neighbors showed up for the first time. People who had once smiled politely at each other in passing were speaking openly. Someone suggested forming a new board. Another brought up calling for a vote to remove Karen as HOA president. A man named Darnell even offered to run for the position himself. He was a retired property manager and knew how to handle HOA issues without turning into a tyrant. Angela stood up in front of everyone and shared what Karen had said to her face. "You bring down the neighborhood value." People gasped. Not because they didn't believe it, but because they'd heard similar things. And now they knew they weren't alone. One by one, people stood and shared their experiences. It wasn't a meeting, it was a reckoning. Word spread fast. Karen must have heard about the gathering because the next morning we got another HOA letter taped to our front door. This one was short and petty. Unapproved neighborhood assembly reported. Possible violation of HOA policy section 3.9. Angela laughed when she read it. She's panicking. And she was right. A few days later, Karen showed up at our door, this time without a clipboard. Just her and her fake smile. "I think things have gotten a little out of hand," she said. I crossed my arms. "You mean people finally started standing up to you?" She ignored that. "I just wanted to say, I hope we can all move forward peacefully. I know tensions have been high, but I've always acted with the best interest of the community." Angela stepped forward. "Did you think your behavior wouldn't have consequences? You've harassed families, targeted people. You told us we didn't belong here. And now you want to smooth it over like it was a misunderstanding?" Karen blinked. "Well, if you're going to be emotional about it, that was it." I closed the door in her face. The next week, the HOA board held a special meeting. For the first time in years, it was packed. Dozens of residents showed up, many of them holding signed petitions to call for a leadership vote. Marcy presented the documents, and Darnell stood up and announced his candidacy. Karen tried to talk, tried to regain control, but the crowd wasn't having it. They booed her. They shouted out their stories. People she dismissed and bullied for years were finally speaking with one voice. And that voice said, "You're done." 3 days later, she resigned. Not just from the presidency, she put her house up for sale. Rumor was she didn't want to stick around in a place where people no longer feared her. When the for sale sign went up, our kids drew chalk hearts all over the sidewalk in front of our house. One of the drawings said, "We belong here." Angela saw it and smiled. "That's the first time I've really felt like we do." Now, the neighborhood is exactly what we hoped it would be when we moved in. People talk. They help each other out. We've got little weekend potlucks, a new board that actually listens, and kids playing in the street again without fear of being reported for disturbing the peace. Karen said we were bringing down the neighborhood value, but all we did was bring it back to life.